Great, so good to see you all back. And so now we've got a poster session, and we'll be hearing from Roberto and Barath and Jasmine. So they've got 5 minutes each to present, and we've got 10 minutes of conversations. Obviously, it's not very long to discuss, but there's fascinating ideas we're going to want to pick up on. So if you don't have time within the 10-minute window to raise questions, then please hold them for later, because we'd love to kind of bring in the ideas from this session and discussions later as well. So don't feel like you can't kind of reintroduce ideas that come up now at a later point.
Can I just interject that? Don't forget there's Anne-Marie as well. So she's going second. Multitasking like mad, Anne-Marie is. So she's second.
Yeah, sorry, Anne-Marie, I just had Anne written down. Okay, so I'm going to pin you all to the screen so we can see you. 1 second. But yeah, so who's going first? Roberto's going first. So Roberto, when you're ready, I'm just finding you to pin you.
Okay, I'm here.
Ah, yes, hello. Okay, I'm going to pin you to the screen. Great. Okay, so when you're ready, you can kick off.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Please be kind with me because it's the first time in front of such an audience. So I'm trying to share here. Can you see? Can you see?
I can see that you're sharing screen, but I can't see anything on it yet.
Trying to.
I can see that now. Can other people see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm having problems. So
I can see it now. Yeah.
Sorry. Wow. Okay. Okay. Please be kind. I don't know why. Okay. I'll try again. Sorry.
It came up there. We did see it, Roberto. It's gone now, but we saw it previously.
Yeah, but I'm having problem. I don't understand, to be honest.
We could switch the order potentially if you're having a problem. Go to Anne-Marie.
Hang on. It's screen sharing.
I think, but I don't know why.
There you go. We've got it. You're on.
Okay. Okay, I think it's okay. Okay, then. Sorry for it. Voila. Here. Can you see? Yeah.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay. Sorry again.
That's okay.
Then my poster is entitled "Crisis is on My Own Side: Non-Human Visions in Multiperspectival iDocs." And I want to point out that filmmakers are employing iDocs as tools to stress or create interspecific links and human communities, which is often the scientific community's focus too. But an exclusively interhuman multiperspectivism seems to inhibit us to not see and feel environmental and sentient non-human agency and lives, but as working machines do. Within such a short premise, I would like to record an old major work that most of you recognize surely, Bear 71, which first released in 2012 and then redesigned and re-released in 2017. Both versions present the 20-minute story of Bear 71, caught and watched for her entire life, ended prematurely on the train rails, narratively located in a national Banff park, visualized through stylized data points. But there are some major differences in the design between the two versions. In the first release, which you can see at left, the interactor is tagged as human with a serial number and could explore and be recorded via webcam and then posted into a surveillance wall upon acceptance, obviously. In this version, the interactor is turned into the animal, observed by the camera eye. These features were removed in the second release, which you can see at right, for a 360 fully explorable open map in VR, filled with icons. Here, instead, the interactor is allowed to play God via the panoptical view of the surveillance network. In any of these releases, the human gaze anthropizes everything. The bear is a human voice, and the data are rendered into a human-friendly visualization. It is evident from my point of view that in such deeply anthropologic gaze, unnecessary narrative multiperspectivity almost gets lost. While in the first release we get closer to the perspective of the animal, in the second, the human and the animal's eyes never really meet, if not through the mediation of the machine's system of vision, made of eyes, the lenses of the camera, brain, the processor, and imagination, the screens. I'm not just referring to a prosthetic delocalization of our own system of vision, but to an alterity, another interactor which sees, processes, and renders data for us. By revealing the interfaces and stylizing the data visualization, BER 71 moves away the alterity, balancing the anesthetic tendencies of VR. At this point, interactivity is crucial because it brings the interactor closer and creates a space of ever-changing relationship. For example, when we click on the BER 71's icon, the dispositive responds with an informational interface and a short video document that not only documentarily shows a predetermined narrative fragment, but also puts us in contact with the bear in a moment of everyday life, transformed by the eruption of technology. IDOC's multiperspectivity allows any interactor to be part of the text with their own identity and agency, while discovering similarities and differences thanks to interactivity. Within the reflection I briefly presented, the staging of the crisis is clear as everything is human-sized and non-human voices struggle to be heard. Counting more and more on interactivity, we should create more inclusive IDOCs as magic circles, we were before saying, to comprehend human, non-human relations and ourselves. As relational dispositive and space of critical reflection, IDOC could serve as a proper survey field to bring in pleasure for participation. And one thing for sure, the uses of IDOCs at their full potential are still a long way to be discovered. Thank you all for attention.
Great, thank you very much. That was fascinating and also perfectly to time. So thank you very much on both fronts for that. Some great ideas there to start us off. Excellent. So we'll save questions to the end, but Anne-Marie, do you want to kick off with your presentation?
Yes, thanks, Ella. Just 1 second. Okay, I'm going to try and do this at the same time. Okay, so can you see my screen already?
Not yet.
Okay. How's that?
Perfect.
So can you see the poster IDOCs as the fifth?
I can.
Okay, great. Okay, so hi, my name is Anne-Marie. Good to see you all today and yet to hear the presentation so far, even though I've been in and out, as Judith says, I'm multitasking. So in my title, so I'm a PhD student, I'm in my second year part-time at UWE under the supervision of Judith, and my title of my PhD is IDOCs as the Fifth Province, Bridging Inhabitant, Scientific and Historical Knowledge for Sustainable Futures. And my title has changed since registering my interest in presenting at the symposium, but it's not far removed from the original title because I am focusing on what inhabitant scientific and historical knowledge can tell us about how humans relate and have related to the natural world or the more than human from Celtic times to the present day. So I'm still looking at the more than human agency in the land and our awareness of that or lack of and how that has changed and why that has changed. So to backtrack a bit, this research came about after becoming aware of the arguments that the solutions to address the ecological and sustainability challenges that we face are mainly rooted in Western scientific knowledge, and this has meant that inhabitant knowledge is largely underutilized. However, as Macondo and Thomas, and among others, argue, knowledge systems seldom grow in isolation. Instead, they typically cross-fertilize and benefit from each other. And so to adapt effectively to the climate challenges that we face, some are calling for an integration of knowledge systems to find solutions to building more sustainable futures. So my practice-based research aims to critically reflect on these arguments by using IDOC methods to set in dialogue inhabitant knowledge with scientific and historical knowledge as it's related to the Mullet Peninsula in the Midwest region of Ireland. So that's down here, if you can see my mouse, in County Mayo, which is highlighted on the map of Ireland there. So to clarify, by inhabitant knowledge, I'm referring to Tim Ingold's use of the term. He says that inhabitants know as they go, as they journey through the world along paths of travel. So in my own words, it's wisdom and experience that is gathered and passed down through the generations in the activities of daily life, including oral literature. And by oral literature, I mean stories, myths, legends, place lore, folklore, and so on. So the concept of the fifth province originates from early medieval Ireland, when the country was divided into 5 provinces as opposed to four in Ireland today. The fifth province was a non-political but equally important second centre to Tara, which was the political centre in Ireland at the time. So between Tara and the fifth province, there was a balancing act between the rational, empirical and political, and the imaginative, intangible and customary. So I'm using the fifth province in this context to reflect on the argument that the empirical be counterbalanced by the wisdom of experience as a means to building more livable futures. The fifth province, it later became a metaphor for a space where opposing ways of seeing and being in the world can coexist. And Mary Robinson, who was the former president of Ireland and is an ex-UN Commissioner for Human Rights, used the concept of the fifth province in her inaugural speech to describe her intention in her presidential role. And she described it as a space within each one of us, that place that is open to the other, that swinging door which allows us to venture out and others to venture in. And Hederman, who's a Benedictine monk and Irish philosopher, said that it describes a space which is neither physical, geographical, nor political, and that it requires a method and a language which are sui generis both to reach it and describe it. And I propose that the IDOC is a method to describe the concept of the fifth province in terms of the IDOC being a fifth province in and of itself. So I chose the Mullet Peninsula, which is one of the most isolated regions in Ireland, and it's also where my father grew up until he moved to Westport, which is about 85 kilometres south, and that's where I was born and raised. So I chose the Mullet as an area of study because of its Celtic roots and the existing extensive archive of local knowledge that's associated with the area. I'll be working in collaboration with an archive there which holds over 1,000 oral history recordings carried out since the 1960s. And further, there's a really rich and layered history of the mullet, which is documented in archaeological surveys, periodicals, historical texts, and other archival material. And finally, the areas of geological interest, and it is a special area of conservation as well. So that mix of local, historical and scientific knowledge associated with the area makes it really good research focus for the purpose of my study. And just to wrap up, I'll be using walk-in interviews, which I'll carry out with inhabitants of the mullet, along with historians, environmental scientists and archaeologists who have studied the area. And I also aim to use drawing as an ethnographic method to gather inhabitant knowledge of the area, where I will invite participants with knowledge of the oral literature of the mullet to draw their responses to the various features or elements in the land. I am unclear about what methods I'll use to put the knowledge in dialogue, but that's one of my research questions. And for instance, I'm considering using an authoring tool to create the IDOC, and will critically examine which tool to use based on the non-linear narrative structure deployed. So I have access to 2 tools, Stornoway and Korsakoff, which I'll evaluate for their suitability for my project. So that's me. Thanks, Ella.
Brilliant, thank you. Another fascinating presentation there. I love what you're saying about iDocs space of integration, the different kinds of knowledge that are really interesting. I think a lot of links to Roberto's presentation. So we'll zoom on to the next speaker, who I think is, oh, who's next? I've lost my order. So I'm writing on the back of my notes, which is why I can't find who's next. Who's next? I think is it Barath?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yes,
great.
it's
Do you want to
Barath,
go
yeah.
across, and then we'll go to Jasmine after that.
Okay, thank you. Is my screen visible?
Yes, I can see it.
Is it a green screen?
Yeah, we
It
got
is.
it.
Okay. Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'm going to be talking for the next 5 minutes about my potential PhD project. And it's about ginger. And my project's titled From Ginger Fields to the Isles of Consumerism. And this is a project about making the geographies of ginger visible. But I would want to start off with what the crisis is here. The crisis that I see with my project is industrialized agriculture of a boom crop in a critically sensitive landscape for its neoliberal consumption. And when we look a level deeper, it becomes a crisis of rapidly changing land use and land cover of the Western Ghats. By 2031, according to Indian Institute of Science, agriculture and plantation could cover nearly 57% of the Western Ghats, and that would reduce the evergreen forest cover to a mere 10% of its current expanse of 165,000 square kilometers. The global prescription is about 33% of the geographical area to be under forest cover. India's national average, though, is 21%, while the state of my current research, Karnataka, has only about 20% forest cover. But it turns out Western Ghats is hottest biodiversity hotspot, which means it's got very high level of species richness and high degree of endemism. But what's affecting this biodiversity hotspot is the expanding monoculture plantations. Ginger is one such affecting monoculture. The repertoire includes the much relished tea, coffee, rubber, teak, eucalyptus, and acacia plantations, apart from the traditional agriculture practiced in the region. And agriculture and horticulture is barely accepted as a threat to the ecosystem health and biodiversity. This happens to be a region which UNESCO has designated a World Heritage Site. Its geomorphic features are of immense importance with unique biophysical and ecological processes. I mean, it is the best representation of a non-equatorial tropical evergreen forest and is home to nearly 325 globally threatened species of flora and fauna. But what is happening in this region is least agriculture. The inorganic ginger is slashed with capital and burned with chemicals in an extremely extractive and exploitative process of production. A form of production that was pioneered or is pioneered by the migrating Kerala ginger pruners ever since the state of Kerala banned this form of ginger cultivation. What has this essentially done is the next crisis that I see is the erosion of food sovereignty. Including the farmers themselves, the population is now dependent on market-based food security, or call it insecurity. Although Western Ghats influences Indian monsoon, supporting nearly 250 million people with its hydrological and watershed functions, land is being appropriated for profit-oriented cultivation. What this is also leading in a global political economy is opaque commodity chains, the next crisis. Because as unsuspecting consumers, we are without the slightest hint of the intricate geography of production and a labyrinth of social relations invested in the provisioning of food onto our tables. Global the supply chain, the longer it gets. The longer it gets, opaquer it gets, and the extent of becoming untraceable. This is where my project figures, and my project is about following the thing, ginger, in a multi-sited visual ethnography from the field of production in the Western Ghats to the point of consumption, documenting people and the processes involved in the global provisioning system. The project will navigate the social reproduction of ginger to eliminate the entanglements along the ginger's commodity chain using participatory visual methods, which will provide additional depth to the ethnographic accounts through an extended language of people's emotions, reactions, and gestures through participation. And interactive documentary practice featuring in the project, it's a very decolonizing approach because it will mediate in building narratives with room for multiple perspectives to coexist of all kinds of authorial voices. Through collaborations, informers will be encouraged to tell their own stories, permitting them and the users to critically engage with the subject and object of the practice. Jugaad, colloquially called Jugaad, that is frugal innovation, will be a conscious part of the decolonizing practice with minimalist visual media technology for the purposes of activism and social mobilizing envisioned into the project. The output eventually will take form of a strategic impact documentary, which will be connecting the non-linear and the polyvocal style of storytelling with the fundamentals of strategic communication for creating and consolidating alternate spaces of public discourse and engagement. iDocs, with its open-ended approach, will stretch across geography, demography, and cultures in critically engaging Ginger's global endeavor. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Another fascinating talk. Okay, we'll move straight on to Jasmine, and we're a bit pushed for time, but lots to pick up on there as well. So Jasmine, do you want to finish up with your presentation?
Thank you, Ella. I'll share my screen. Can you see my poster?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Worldwide, many refugees and migrants suffer from difficult living conditions in temporary shelters. The UNHCR speaks of a shelter crisis. While the mass media often use standardized images to address the issue, some iDocs create counter-narratives by using a multiperspectival approach and by amplifying the voices of those who are seldom heard. One example is the interactive web documentary Data Stories from 2013 about a refugee camp in Kenya. The news often portrays the refugees as helpless victims. Data Stories, in contrast, focuses on the creative side of the camp and provides cameras for the refugees to represent themselves. The videos show very active camp residents, whether in the self-made music video or during journalistic practices. Speaking with Jacques Rancière, this is an intervention into the existing order of the visible and audible, resulting in an alternative perception of the camp. The refugees who receive little attention in the dominant order are put in the spotlight to talk about issues important to them. Moreover, the political potential lies in the polyphonic mosaic. In one video, for example, the Somali Liban tells how he was separated from his family in the camp. In another, Abeloni talks about the sad separation from his family in his homeland. This multiplication of personal narratives indirectly criticizes the causes of these separations. However, the project does not present the refugees as a homogeneous group, but respects the plurality that Chantal Mouffe considers important for democracy. We meet people with individual stories from different countries and with different traditions, for example, in the video Somali Dance. Looking at the practices, I would like to argue that the collaborative processes in the camp create a subaltern counterpublic, which, according to philosopher Nancy Fraser, allows its members to formulate oppositional interpretations of their identities, interests, and needs. Another example of an iDoc about a shelter crisis is the Italian scroll documentary Quattro Stelle Hotel from 2014. It introduces us to a self-organized community of refugees and migrants in an occupied former hotel in Rome. While newspapers speculated about criminality in the building, the scroll documentary shows families living together peacefully and with few resources, working, cooking, and playing with the children. A variety of photos and videos present the plurality of personal stories, for example, of occupants talking about their despair, and provide insights into the individual rooms of families from, among others, Morocco, Romania, and Ethiopia. The project responds to the diversity of the residents by focusing on the details of the rooms. These are contrasted with each other through vertical scrolling, creating a multi-perspectival image of the occupied hotel. For example, we first see a room with a mural depicting an Islamic motif, and then another room showing a tapestry with the motif of the Christian Last Supper. The resulting split screen illustrates the multi-ethnic community and counters the stereotype that people of different cultures cannot live together. The goal of the project was to extend the subaltern counter-public to the wider public that perceived the place as dangerous, by mobilizing the users to participate in the fight for housing rights. At public screenings in the occupied hotel, people from all over Rome were able to come into direct contact with the residents they had seen online. In this way, the project helps to build bridges between the occupants and the rest of society. To sum up, both projects indicate a democratic potential based on the polyphonic forms and the alternative practices. Instead of relying on stereotypical representations, they use the affordances of iDocs to confront the status quo with counter-narratives and thereby create new perspectives on the shelter crises. Thank you.
Thank you, that was fascinating, really interesting presentation. I've got lots of questions myself, but I'm going to allow the audience to ask questions first. Yeah, great set of talks. Thank you so much to you all. It's great to hear about emerging work in the field and lots of exciting ideas coming out of that already. Who had their hand up? I think my hands have disappeared. I just saw three, now they're gone. Stefano, do you have a question, I think? Nope. Oh, Anna, yeah?
Thanks to all four of you, which was quite an arcing experience to see all these projects. And I think what came up in all of them was the decolonization idea. And I was wondering whether one could not bring it together, not only the multi-perspectivity, but also the idea of the pluriverse, as for example, by Escobar. That really popped up in my mind, and also Haraway and the post-human, because I think it's really very egocentric in some way if we think of crisis in terms of anthropos, us as human standing in the middle of the crisis, because actually lots of the crises we are currently facing, we are maybe the origin, but maybe we are not the center of it. And maybe also this decentering of the human in the iDoc can be a quite interesting experience, just as an idea, because I think that comes up at least, for example, in Bear 71. And
yeah, thank you. Does anyone want to respond to that quickly? We've only got a couple of minutes. But...
Yeah, I think the decentering idea is central because we live in a world of multitudes where we have the necessity to take into account not only human but non-humans' lives. So we have to learn to communicate and to relate with machines, with animals, with plants, and decentralizing the whole thinking from human and human alone. We can start to underline, to experience a real multi-perspectivity where every entity, every alterity has something to say and can say it effectively.
Yes, really important. I think something that struck me that I wanted to just mention was how all the presentations kind of really illustrated how iDocs can become a tool for achieving something. So I think we had Roberta talking about iDocs kind of like a space of survey. In Anne-Marie's presentation, it was about how to integrate different knowledge systems within iDocs. Barath talked about how iDocs can kind of make the untraceable more tangible and traceable. And then we just heard about Jasmine using iDocs to kind of foreground counter narratives. So in all these instances, there's a very kind of deliberate action point that iDocs are kind of helping to achieve. I think that really relates to what we're saying about the extended mind and how iDocs can kind of help us think in particularly constructive ways. So I thought they were kind of really work well together. So we're at 12 o'clock. So anyone's got any kind of burning points or questions, I could take those. But if not, I think we'll have a kind of 1-2 minute changeover break for session 2.
Good plan. Yeah,
Cool.
I think we need a couple of minutes just to let all those brilliant presentations settle before careering into the next session.
Great. So yeah, no burning questions. So save your thoughts for a conversation later. But we'll have a couple of minutes now while we just hand over to session 2. Judith's going to share for us. Cool.
Brilliant. Thank you to all of those beautiful presentations.